Hi everyone, and welcome to the November edition of the Maria Thun planting and sowing calendar. I hope you've all well arrived in November so far and enjoying the slightly warmer weather that we've at least had here in Derbyshire. Now, November, let's have a look at the calendar. You can see on this side here these little trines. And the other day somebody asked me, what do you think of trines? So I guess I thought, well, let's have a look at it and look at what they mean and why they're there and what the concept is and what they actually mean. Trines, to me, explain partly why the calendar is how it is, and they also show that planets too have an impact on plant growth. Now for November, if you have a look at the first half on the diary page, you'll see two little green trines on the first and the second, standing for the water and leaf influence. And then you see a small yellow trine on the 4th of November, which represents the light or the flower influence. And trines generally occur when planets are 120 degrees from one another. So the two planets are usually both standing in the same type of constellation. And generally it's a positive effect of the trine overrules the underlying lunar constellation. So as you can see in the calendar, there may be a leaf time shown in the calendar, despite the moon actually being in a flower constellation. So this is the impact of how the planets are related to each other. And to me, it just means that, you know, it's a complex world that we live in, and there are lots of influences coming from the cosmos and the constellations of the moon, of the sun, of course, but also of the planets that we can make use for to grow great plants. Now, if you look at the recommendations at the bottom here that you'll find on the pages of the calendar, it talks about compost making. And here in our gardens, we make individual compost heaps throughout the season, and then usually this time of year or throughout winter, we start turning them and put the preps in again. So that might also be a really good activity for November. And to gather up all the remaining organic waste materials. If you haven't already made your compost, now is a good time for that as well. Now let's look at the first half of the calendar again and the main events. You can see that we'll start with a new moon on the 1st of November, and then on the 15th there is a full moon worth taking note of. Right before the full moon on the 14th, you can see the grey bar, which is perigee, where the moon is closest in its orbit around Earth. Usually correlates with a blank day, an unfavourable time, where it's best not to interact with your crops in the garden. If you had a look down here in November and notice the little box about Maria Thun's tree log preparations, you might have wondered what this is all about compared to the regular biodynamic preparations. Now, in 2003, due to regulations, it became fairly difficult to access the animal parts needed to make the preparations. So Maria Thun went about and developed the tree bark preparations, and if you're interested in trialing that and making them, November the 3rd would be the day to do that. It's a Sunday, so that might come in handy. And well, I guess the work on these preparations is far from finished, but as always in life, I think you have to make your own observations and your own experiments to really understand if these could work for you. Now, the barks kind of represent the type of planet that the animal part would be connected with. So for instance, for the 502, the yarrow, it would be Venus, which is birch. For the 503 chamomile, it's Mercury, which is larch. For the 504 oak, it's Mars, and that would be oak. And for 506 dandelion, Jupiter, it will be maple. Now, this is only about the compost preparations, because they're the ones that contain the parts that were difficult to get hold of. The 504 nettle and 507 valerian obviously don't need an alternative. So if you're interested in trialing that, at the back of the 2024 Maria Thun calendar on page 93 and following, you'll find a lot more instructions about how to make these preparations. Now, I hope this short little intro to the November calendar got you curious to actually have a look yourself and dive deeper into what's going on in November. And last but not least, if you're in the UK, do come by on the 10th of November in London at the Rudolf Steiner House. We've got the Biodynamic Joyful Food Festivals organised by the BDA with an awards session afterwards, and it would be great to see as many people there as possible.